prophet, but I'm giving you a chance to come to Jesus because Jesus, he let you know hell have enlarged itself. I'm trying to tell you to stay out of hell because when that tongue goes, you're speaking from the pits of hell. You're speaking wickedness. You're not speaking.
Shut up. Shut up. You done listened to too many of these idiots for far too long.
Come on.
We're coming to you blasting the idiot preacher.
That I'm a false prophet, but I'm giving you a chance to come to
Shut
Jesus
the hell up.
because Jesus, he let you know.
I could never sit under one of these kind of preachers ever in my life.
In case you don't realize it, you are now listening to the Revival Hour.
Here you go. Come on.
Coming to you straight from your host, Brady Goodwin, and his trusty sidekick, Jay Witt.
Welcome, y'all. Welcome.
We welcome you all, friends and enemies. Oh, yes, we welcome our enemies. You think that we're your enemies, but we're really your friends.
Hey.
Get in the chat. Greet someone with an unholy kiss. Huh? Get in the chat. Show somebody some love. Say, you have now tuned into the hour of power. Yes, sir.
Yes, yes. Come
We're
on.
going to use this time to, in a short while, highlight some of the great comments that we got from last week. Right, Brady? I'm going to depend on you to do that. Well, I'll get the quotes from the writings.
Okay. Come on in and greet somebody in Reason's name. We are excited to be back with you. Each and every Tuesday, we make a commitment in light of everything that's going on in life. Busy lives, all kinds of issues that pop up. You know how it is, just the regular rigmarole, how life just happens to go. We all got issues, but we make a point every Tuesday to try to be here to help somebody who's looking at the front door. Maybe somebody who's on the inside looking at the front door saying, I think I'm on my way out. We also hear from those who've already made it out, but find themselves still looking back at the door, not because they want to go back in. They're wondering how the hell they were ever tricked in the first place.
Yes, sir.
Listening to exit strategy helps them remember, oh, that's how I got in, and that's why I got out.
Yes, sir.
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
We welcome you all. Brady, you got any good quotes from last week?
I'm pulling it up now, so I got caught up in a little monologue there. Give me a sec.
Oh yeah, no sweat. We'll just continue on with the greeting music. Get on the chat.
There were a few really good ones last week. Trying to find one that's not so long. Someone said this a message, a comment from Empathic Sage 83 said the fear of hell is what I believe made me dismiss illogical issues. So they saw the illogical issues in the Bible, said, but the fear of hell is what made me dismiss the illogical issues in my mind and stay longer. Love had nothing to do with me staying as long as I did. Once I learned about the inconsistency in the creation story and the origin of hell, I let go of both handles that kept me. Yeah, feel you. This is a good one from David DeBow, 3236 says, we were looking at chapter 1 of Peter N's book. He says, Enns performs sleight of hand in citing his marriage as an analogy of a relationship that grows stronger and that grows stronger the less you know about the other person. What really happened is that he learned something new and unanticipated about his wife. His knowledge about her increase. Wow, how about that? I was trying to figure out how to word that last week, but he nailed it. So Enns compared us having this mysterious relationship with God, where we don't really know God like we thought we knew God, and the mystery getting deeper and deeper. Enns made this connection between, he said, hey, it's like me and my wife. I learned new things about my wife. I thought I knew and David DeBow picks up and says, no, your wife didn't get more mysterious. Your knowledge about her increased. You can't compare your knowledge about your wife increasing with your relationship with God, where your knowledge about him decreases.
Yeah.
I'll just finish his quote. His comment. He says, and might also have gained a sharper awareness that there is much more about his wife still to learn, but that is not the same thing. Excellent comment. Excellent comment. Yeah.
So as usual, we have the ever so insightful audience.
Yes.
I marvel at the consistency of the audience and being brilliant. I mean, it seems to be just populated with Michael Apples. It's great. It's great. Thank you guys for tuning in and checking us out, coming along for the ride. We got a nice little show. Go ahead.
San, we see that super chat. Thank you for that. Euro 249 says much love. Sending much love to the Ichabod crew and to everybody in the chat. I appreciate that.
Yeah, we're very grateful. We're grateful for those who showed up for the live. Was it a few days ago? You had Jen.
Jennifer Bird, Dr. Jennifer
Bird on, and she came through and just tore the place up and turned people's understanding of marriage upside down, biblical, Christian marriage or whatever. She's just always bringing a fresh perspective. Every time I've seen her, she has something new to drop on us, and it's always insightful. And I really appreciated listening to her again on the Diablo Critics live that they did on Sunday, where they again addressed what's his name, Matt, Mike Wingers, Mike Winger, who had put out a video trying to refute Satan's guide, and now he's being refuted. This is one of the beauties of the internet, right?
His video is the gift that keeps on giving. It just gives us so much content, and I'm sure many of you out there, you've already just you're able to attest to this. There is so much great content coming out these days, just from regular people who got tired of being lied to, tired of believing a lie, and decided, you know what, I'm going to speak up. There are people who've even gotten inspired by Ichabod and went and started their own channel, saying, "Wait, I can use my voice and speak up." So it's a great time. It's a really great time.
I saw a comment I think it was a week ago or a week and a half, where somebody was saying something about you, Brady, being if you teamed up with certain individuals, you could be like you guys could become the new Four Horsemen. And I think one of the things I really do like about this new era is that we're not looking to Four Horsemen. In case you don't notice, there was a fifth horsewoman that Ayan Hersey Ali, who has since she's apostatized from apostasy. And this is the problem when you look to it. Maybe this is one of the good things about me being anonymous is that you don't want to look to these four horsemen. That's one of the great democratizing of skepticism and atheistic and agnostic thought. I really love it. I love the fact that we're no longer looking to just Richard Dawkins or
Sam Harris
or Christopher Hitchens or somebody. That you guys are the church. Come on, somebody. We need to spread this message. And there's something really, everybody has, and this, I really believe this. we all have a unique take on this skepticism.
True.
Or this agnosticism, or if you don't consider yourself a skeptic and you're somehow an atheist, whatever you consider yourself, you have a unique take on it. And even if you get a following, you only have a couple hundred or tens of followers, reaching the world where you're at, you're making a difference.
Yep.
In as much as you can be, it's funny coming from me because I'm hidden. But for those of you who don't feel the need to hide yourself, and you can be transparent about what it is that you feel, you're changing the world. You're changing it one person at a time. You know, when the temptation is to look at the great population here on this planet, 8 billion or whatever, and say, well, it's just so many people. What can I do? Well, you're one of those people, and you have a circle. And you know what? This is how change happens. Somehow we got to get this ridiculous theism out of here, and we're gonna get it out of here one person at a time if we have to, but we're gonna get it out of here. We're gonna. I was watching
an interview the other day of Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he was interviewing what's the guy's name? Sapolsky. I forget the scientist's name, but he was asking him about free will. This guy just wrote a book called Undetermined, or Determined. I think the book is called Determined. About how there's no we don't have free will. And he made this prediction that it's probably going to take about 600 years for atheism to replace theism. Wow. And then they had a discussion about, do you really think it'll take that long, or do you really think it'll happen that soon? But when you and I first talked, Jay-Witt, you were thinking like my goal of disbanding belief in the Bible, you thought it was too lofty. But I think you kind of have since, maybe you haven't come to the idea that it's even possible, but the comment that you just made about one person at a time, it is changing the landscape of what we used to think about how formidable theism is.
Yes. And I really do believe that, like just even watching Diablo Critic, the resources that are out here now to challenge people to think a little more deeply about the things they believe, the world has never seen this.
True.
We've never seen the accessibility. First-rate biblical scholars who, back when I was in evangelicalism, I was told all of these skeptical scholars and stuff. I was basically given a straw man of them. But I never got a chance to hear them fully fleshed out in their own voice. And I couldn't see how reasonable they are and just how personable they are and just normal they are. You had this feeling that these people were, they were hiding horns under their hair or something like these, that they were just this evil cabal, so to speak. And they were in the ivory tower somewhere.
I think that's what happens to a lot of Christians who go to university or who go to these liberal schools, and they sit under some of these professors who are, they go in with the armor of Ephesians 6 on, right? The helmet of salvation. And they're going to go in there. They're going to protect themselves against this evil professor. They're going to maybe stun them with a question or a comment. They're going to get all this secular knowledge and come out knowing how to refute it. Then they go and they sit under some of these professors and say, wait, you're not a demoniac. You're a real person. You've got a family. You're reasoning through this. You're using logic. You're doing the very thing that I'm doing, but you just don't have the presuppositions that I have. And so it humanizes critical thought. Before I even say it humanizes atheists or humanizes skeptics, just to humanize critics, I think goes a long way. And that's what the internet has done. It's almost like a Gutenberg press kind of situation where now you have this overabundance of these kinds of people being published thanks to YouTube.
Yeah, there was a time when we kind of had to take the Christian's word for it, just like we had to take the writers of the Hebrew Bible's word for what the Canaanites were like. You remember? So there was a time, now that archaeology has gotten much, it's become a very specific kind of science. They're able to unearth things, and they're starting to get the perspective of the Assyrians and other people, and you start realizing, oh, the story that we got all these years was actually not the story, you know?
Right. Right.
So in a similar way, here now these skeptical scholars are now able to be public facing, and you can see, oh, there are no horns under their hair. These people are regular people. These are just people who refuse to gaslight you. These are people who have not turned off their reason when they came to certain passages where the passage didn't correlate with what they know, the science or whatever else. You know, say for instance, there's some Babylonian artifact that doesn't cohere with it. I'm just saying this hypothetically, but when they uncover different things, they just present you with what they see, and it's not so much that they have an evil agenda, so much as they aren't willing to lie for some statement of faith or some sort of some creed. It really does recast what we thought of a skeptical scholar. I'm speaking primarily to our fundamentalists and stuff.
I would say critical scholar, because the whole idea of being a skeptic, I think the skeptic part comes later. I think you're critical first. And being
that's
critical
better.
leads you to being skeptical.
Yeah, critical is the word I probably should have been using this whole time. But yes, the critical scholars, you know, because you have these feelings. A lot of times Christians would literally paint. I mean, some of them have cartoons. You know, you think of the old Chick magazines. I don't know if you guys ever saw those. Chick magazine. They used to do these cartoons, and everything. Behind everything was the great conspiracy of the Roman Catholic Church. It was like, you know, they had this, and it just, much like the character of Satan himself in evangelicalism. He's just some guy who just gets his kicks off of just being evil. It's like, oh, why is Satan so evil? Oh, he's like, he's got his chair facing the opposite direction. You just see a silhouette against the light, and he's just an evil being.
You just described yourself, Jay Witt.
And now I'm doing the laugh.
we got to get to the writings.
Yes, we do have to get. Yes, whenever I start describing myself as the evil character, it's time to get into the writings. Indeed. Facing the light, laughing. So today we'll have two readings. I guess I'll just read them just for efficiency's sake. This is a German. He was born in 1853. He died in 1944. And his name is Isolde Kurz. That's Kurz. Hopefully I'm pronouncing his last name right. Kurz. He says, we call mystical a connection that we feel without understanding it. What say you? Want me to read that again?
Yes, please.
We call mystical a connection that we feel without understanding it.
Okay. It reminds me of the old saying, you know, 100 years ago, whatever, what we call science or invention would have been called magic, you know, before people understood it. So I think magic and mystical, those are words that we would use to describe a technology or just a facet of nature that we don't quite get. And so we'll speak about it in mystical ways. It's a step away from what I would call superstition. I think calling it mystical is one thing. It's just a way to say I don't understand it. And maybe you're leaning towards there's a supernatural explanation. But then the superstition kicks in when you start trying to put words to what you don't understand. You start trying to put names to what you don't understand. And you call it God, and you'll call it fate, and you'll call it, you know, you start trying to figure out what it is, but you really don't know. So I think superstition is mysticism taken to the next level. Mysticism is really wonder.
Isn't it interesting how like the faiths depend on the one hand the wonder and the being confounded before something, but at the same time the other side of it is the longing, the wanting of certain things. Like you find yourself, there isn't a human being who lives long enough who doesn't find themselves in a situation where they wish they could change things. And it's not, it makes sense that people would dream up some sort of force or invisible power that actually is going to, if you could kind of just offer the right oblation or whatever, you're going to, this being is going to make things right.
Yeah.
That's just wish thinking. So you have the wish thinking on the one hand, and then on the other hand, you have being confounded before phenomena in life, and not having an answer for it, and and utilizing both of those things can lead you to the same place of putting faith in something that's not real.
Yeah.
Well, the next reading is from the same author. That's Kurz, and it says, shallowness with an impenetrable surface is often regarded as unfathomable.
Say that. I like it already. Say it one more time, though. Say it slowly.
Shallowness with an impenetrable surface is often regarded as unfathomable. I thought that was a really good one.
Wow. Shallowness with an impenetrable surface. So something that's not really deep, but something that doesn't allow you to demonstrate something that doesn't allow you to demonstrate its lack of depth is often regarded as what was it?
It says shallowness with an impenetrable surface is often regarded as unfathomable.
Unfathomable. Yeah. You've made this comment, you've made this point before in different words. Oftentimes people will talk about the incomprehensibility of God as if it's some like, oh, great. And what is Romans 11:33-36 says?
Yeah. Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God.
Yeah. It's like, wait a minute, maybe it's not really that deep. Maybe it's just stupid. Like maybe it's maybe what's really being said here is really just it confounds you because of its ridiculousness. But rather than accept that or embrace that or admit that, you'll call it deep.
I love this aphorism because if you take the shallowness and wrap it in something to make it in, so this is such a good aphorism because it's dealing with depth ultimately, even though depth isn't on the other side of it. That's what it's dealing with. Yeah. Shallowness over against, and often there is this sort of contrast. And this one is a perfect contrast because you have shallowness and depth. And what they're saying is that if you wrap your shallowness in such a way where it's impenetrable, so if you make it something that's non-falsifiable, for instance, in the case of religion, you're basically dressing it up in such a way that it can be regarded as something that's deep and unfathomable, but it actually is just shallowness dressed up as being deep. You've made it impenetrable by making it something that can't. And now this leads us right into that discussion we were having earlier when we were talking about. I'm trying to recall exactly how I thought it through, but I remember saying it's interesting that on the other side of life, that is in death, often believers will tell us, this was all spawned by me reading a comment from months ago where someone said, you're going to find out on the other side. Basically, when you're dead, when you die and see the Lord, you're going to know that he's real then, but it's going to be too late, essentially. And it's like, so what you're admitting, hey, Brady, I don't want to say too much here. I should let you interject.
Well, no, I'm just thinking because Michael Apple is in the chat now. He just popped in. And both Michael Apple and I got that very threat on Facebook today.
Oh,
somebody told us that, you're going to see, I hope you're ready. You're going to regret this and, all that. But you go ahead, make the point that what you were saying about that.
And the thing I noted is, so the Christian who says that, and mind you, you Christian, you might be thinking that right now. You're listening to us. You're like, oh, this hooded guy and the other guy, oh, it's all a laughing matter now. You won't be laughing. God's going to get the last laugh, right?
You'll see one day. You'll see how real it was. You'll see that you should have trusted him, and
you're going to believe then.
Yeah,
you're going to believe then. So if you really think about it, what you're saying is that he could make himself more apparent now. So basically what you're saying is he's not, you're basically saying that you're commending us believing on slim evidence in this thing. And you're admitting that the evidence isn't very good. Because what you're saying is that when you die, the evidence is going to be so overwhelming, you're going to have to believe then. Just think about what your claim entails when you say that. Because what you're saying is he has the ability to show up and show out in such a way that it's undeniable.
It's beyond doubt,
it's beyond doubt, and you will believe in that day when you're dead. Well, why doesn't he just do it now?
Right.
And now think about the other thing that this entails is if you really look at that kind of setup, it's the same exact setup that a person who's never going to make good on anything that they're saying would have in place. Like they would promise something in a place where you could never have to deliver on it. And then just say, you're going to find out then, but you're going to be dead. You won't be able to come back and tell anybody that you found out.
Yeah.
So if it was a sham, if it was just a charade, it would look exactly like what you're describing. Yeah. And you wonder why some of it, go ahead. I can hear you.
Well, no, I'm just saying, I want people to understand what you're saying there. Like, if you were to design a religious scam, would it look any different than your religion looks today? I don't care whether you're Christian, Muslim. If you put the proof of the religion on the other side of life, where you got to die, and then you'll see, then you'll know. If you were to design a fake religion, would the proof of the fake religion look any different than the proof of your religion today? And
Absolutely.
I think if you really sit and ask that question, you realize, like, damn, the thing I'm believing, this looks indistinguishable from a con.
Yeah. And you know what? There's an old wise, so we've never quoted this aphorism, but the aphorism goes something like this. If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, guess what, buddy? Guess what?
So Derek Lambert of Myth Vision, he had a whole season where he was saying to the apologists who kept trying to say, Jesus is different. Jesus is different. You know, yeah, they had apotheosis in Greek and all Greek writing and all that, but Jesus is different. And Derek kept saying, hey, in Jesus' story, you have this trope. In Caesar's story, you have this trope. In this person's story, you have this trope. And in Hercules, you have this trope. It looks like a duck. And they kept trying to find ways to make the Christian duck different. And it's like, well, I mean, what do you want me to do with that? But like you said, but on the other side of this life, God's going to prove it to you. What's preventing him? And I asked this on Facebook last week. I asked Christians, and some of you who are on the Facebook thread, you've seen it. I said to Christians, let's just say it's all true. Let's say the Bible is true, Jesus is real, and all that, the resurrection, all that, right? But I'm unconvinced. I don't believe it. And let's say it's true. You get to heaven, I'm in hell. And you, Christian, you turn to God and you say, hey, God, was there nothing more you could have done to convince Brady that this was all true? And the question to the Christian is, what do you think God's going to say? Is God going to say, yeah, I could have done more? Or is God going to say, no, I've done all I could? And it's
I gave you
like,
my son. I gave you my only begotten son.
Well, yeah, and some people did say there was a plethora of answers. Some was, what more could he do? But I challenged them. I said, wait, you guys aren't reading the question. The question is not what more could God have done to prove that he loved me? Because somebody said, what greater love could a man have than to lay down his life? I said, no. I would agree that if that's what he did, that's the greatest love he could have. Maybe we could talk about, he could have done some other things, but okay, that's a great love that he showed then. But if I'm unconvinced that it happened, the question that you're asking God in this hypothetical scenario is not, what more could you have done to demonstrate your love for Brady? The question is, what more could you have done to convince Brady that you actually did that?
Well, yeah. You remember what the example I gave you? So was it today, or I think it was today, where I was saying, you know, for those who followed what was going on with Tory Lanez and his trial, when he ended up getting convicted, some people said, you see, he should have actually taken the stand. He should have taken the stand because, it's one thing to have all of these.
Let me set that up, because what we were talking about was, okay, let's say God does go out of his way. He condescends. He comes to earth in the person of Jesus Christ. He lives the perfect life that I could never live. He went to the cross. He died for me. He rose from the dead. He did all that. My sins are paid for. I don't know it yet. I have to find out about it one day. Then I have to believe and stay a believer, unto salvation, until all that, right? God did his part.
Yep.
Now here I am in 2024. I believed it at first 30 years ago. I unbelieved it at some point. Because even though I hear that that's what God did, I don't know that that's what God did, because now I'm looking at the people who are telling me about it. Oh, he wrote about it in a book. He had it passed down from generation to generation. And I'm saying, okay, I don't trust these messengers. And because I don't trust these messengers, I'm second guessing the message. Could God not have at any point, if he's going to do it when I die anyway, he's going to say, voila, haha, I told you I was real. If he's going to do it anyway, could God not
Thank you
have done
for setting it
anything-
up again. Yes, thank you. Yes,
Could
this
God
is it.
not have done anything more to convince me that this great, because remember I told you I loved the gospel message. Could God not have done anything more to convince me that this message that I loved, but I began to doubt that it was true? Could God not do anything more to convince me that it was true? And the question is, well, he sent people, he sent a Bible. The question is, well, why couldn't God speak for himself?
Yeah.
Now,
Why is he behaving like Tory Lanez and sitting back and saying, it's too risky of a thing for me to it's too risky for me to take the stand in my own defense. I'll let all these apologists and all of these people who, mealy-mouthed apologists speak for me. Right. Because if they'll get it across better than, I don't want to take the risk of getting on the witness stand and ruining it for myself.
Here's the thing. Christians would say the reason, well, we got topics to get into that we're not getting into. This is a conversation that's worth having.
Yeah.
The only reason why a witness would not take the witness stand in his own defense is if he's not a credible witness. Like the lawyer might even, like Tory Lanez might have wanted to say that, yo, just put me on the stand. Let me plead my case. Lawyer might have said, nah, Tory, you got bars in some of your songs where you talk about gunplay or maybe just, I don't know, all these, you got things about you that I don't like you on the witness stand. So no. The only reason why the witness the person on trial does not take the stand in its own defense is if for some reason they're not credible or they feel like you're going to ruin it.
Now remember, because for all the Christians thinking, well, God doesn't have to answer to you. He's going to do it, right? According to you guys, as soon as I die, boom, all of reality hits me in the face. So he's going to do it then. Right. But up until that very second that you die, he's totally going to he's just going to leave it up to the mealy-mouthed apologists.
Why just think about the witness stand in his own defense?
Yeah.
What's so uncredible about him as his own witness?
Why doesn't he allow what he's going to make happen in eternity bleed just a little into life?
Well, the Christian would say he does do that. I had one of my old ministry partners. He told me, I said, why do you believe this? And he gave things. I was like, nah. He said, and plus I have the internal witness of the Holy Spirit. So there's your witness. There's God taking the witness stand on his own behalf.
With that said, we have to get to this week's subject. We got to get to our videos because I will go on and on with these guys indefinitely. But just understand, Christian, we understand that way of thinking, and we as they said in the book of Daniel, you've been weighed and found wanting. He says, many tekel, was it Uparson? He says, you've been weighed and found wanting. Come on here.
And there's also the person that says the reason why God may not show up and do what he could do to convince you now is because God wants your faith. We're going to talk about that in a minute. I'm going to read this super chat from John Geyer, $5 super chat. Thank you so much, John. John says, talk about confounding. We were talking about the mystical nature of this message from Bible God. John says, talk about confounding. Consider the concept of the Trinity. Profound? No. Utterly stupid.
Yeah.
And when you think about how you end up with this doctrine, when you think about how it was cobbled together, and what it was cobbled together from, yeah, you realize how, sorry, not to be offensive, but the way it strikes the mind that's left all that behind, it's utterly stupid.
Yeah. Well, they just call it they call a mystery everything that it's yeah. We used to laugh at my grandmother because vinegar was the cure-all for anything. You could be dying, you could have stage 4 cancer. She'd be talking about vinegar, and in a sense, I feel like mystery is that vinegar of religion. Yeah. It's like, we don't have to worry about adjusting our angles and making sure things are right and justified and making clean arguments. No, once we hit a point where we don't want to have any more discussion about it, we just say it's a mystery.
Yeah.
And that ends the conversation.
Yeah.
For some.
Yeah. We got another super chat from Michael Apple. Michael, man, thank you so much for your support. We really do appreciate you. $10 super chat. Michael Apple says 1,974 years, 1,974 years and counting since Jesus, if he's a real person and really said the things that would attribute 1,974 years ago, Jesus is supposedly have said, this generation will not pass away.
Yeah.
Until all these signs of the end have come, and you're going to see the Son of Man coming on the clouds with great glory and all that. 1,974 years and counting. Michael Apple says, seriously, the procrastinating eschaton is taking its sweet time.
Yeah.
Indeed, it is.
One of the great things about that observation is if you make an eschaton, the coming of an eschaton, something that can go on indefinitely in perpetuity, you basically set yourself up where every huge disaster can be perceived as some sort of omen of this impending doom or this impending change. If you are
on my Facebook page, you see it all the time. Michael Apple, we got one person who right now has given me and Michael Apple a timeline of what's going to happen. I think in like 3 years or something like that. Of these end time events, and he's basing that on, like you said, all kinds of signs in the sky. If you guys remember Essence, the woman who called in a few weeks ago, because she's an unbeliever. Her husband is still a believer, and she's trying to work through that. She just messaged me today on Facebook and said, hey, the issue's kind of hitting the fan now because her unbelief, she's kind of holding her ground and her husband's having a hard time with it. But her husband is looking toward, maybe some of you know about this, April 8th. There's going to be an eclipse. And there are people who are talking about April 8th as a sign of the time. And she said her husband is sort of hinting like, hey, remember I was telling you? Well, now look, April 8th is coming. And so everything you're saying, Jay Witt, yes, anything that happens in the sky or in the earth or whatever can become part of.
Yeah, and it's just like when people say, oh, God's wrath is gonna come down, and any kind of calamity that befalls you for the rest of your life, you can live another 50 years. They will see that as God doling out his judgment on you for what you're doing. And when you have no expiration date on these things, you do understand that anything that happens, you can see as the fulfillment of it. That's the nature.
Roped into the prophecy.
Yeah, it's the easiest kind of prophecy to give is a prophecy that has an indefinite amount of years to be fulfilled.
But see, here's the thing. Jesus did not have an indefinite amount of time. Some of you standing here now.
We understand that, but they've chosen to reinterpret it in such a way where they have, it can go on forever.
Michael Apples.
There's a sense in which
the end of days is evergreen.
Yeah. So it's like, if you say, if a person apostatizes and you say, God's going to get you in this life, you're going to see his wrath. Well, that's going to happen. Right. The person's going to die. They're going to probably get sick or something before you. People who are not sick at all usually don't die. So it's very likely they're going to get sick. Something's going to happen. I mean, just as long as you live, there are going to be things that go wrong. And you will always be able to attribute the calamity that the person's experiencing to the judgment of God. You will always be able to do that. And it's the nature, you render it unfalsifiable by its indefiniteness.
Well, I'll say this to the person who's contemplating following their heart into deconversion. I can assure you, maybe you'll still grapple with the fear of hell if that's been drummed into you. You stop giving a F about all these prophecies, all this spiritual talk and all that. Life goes on until it doesn't. But life goes on, and you leave that, you drop those weights, and you're free from it. You don't spend your time looking up at the sky, wondering, is that a sign? Or you don't interpret. The good things happen, bad things happen. I was going to give a shout out to Albert Kim, who's in the chat, who's part of the Ichabod team. Albert Kim just went through radiation treatment for cancer. Things are going to happen in this life, believer or unbeliever. But as a deconverted person, you don't take the bad that happens and say, this must be God getting back at me. You leave all that behind. And no dark cloud is hanging over you. Like, you take life as it comes.
I remember saying how narcissistic it is to believe that you have bad luck. Just like, get over yourself. Like, you're not important enough to have bad luck. You know what I mean? So it's like,
All right, so we'll hold on then, because in light of that, let's get to our first video. We took 41 minutes. But I think this was good. It was good. It was a good 41 minutes to get to our first video. We're going to deal with Kanye. And some of know, Kanye came out with Jesus Walks back in the early 2000s. And people thought, hey, this guy, Kanye, he's the new breed of conscious rapper. He had the song Self-Conscious, where he was challenging how the culture was big on low self-esteem. And so he had this conscious streak to him.
He made the statement, I made Jesus walks, so I'm never going to hell.
And Christians took some umbrage with that. Like, wait. You can't be talking Jesus walks now. You don't even know what the road to salvation is. But then 20 years went by. 20 years went by, and Kanye found himself in the Jesus camp, so much so that he was doing Sunday services all over the country, put out an album called Jesus is King. You can catch him palling around with right-wing evangelical pastors, inviting them to speak at his Sunday service. I had word back when I was still in the Christian faith. I was in it by membership. My heart had already left, but I had people who knew the pastor who was discipling Kanye say, hey, a pretty solid pastor is discipling him and pouring into him. But then he would see different things that from Kanye to make you wonder, like, man, what's really going on? Well, his most recent album, Vulture, it sounds much like the old Kanye, where he is as sexually explicit and just so, and Christians are saying, see, I told you we shouldn't have celebrated him. I told you we shouldn't have embraced him as a brother. I told you, what's the passage? Do not exalt.
Lay hands suddenly on no man, that kind of thing.
Yeah, don't lay hands suddenly on a new convert or whatever. Christians were saying, hey, I told you we sped, we should have slowed down, because now look at the fruit. He's not really sold out for this thing. And so Kanye did an interview. You want to set up the interview real quick?
Well, no. I think you're doing an excellent job. So he's got this new album, Vultures, out, and the guy who's interviewing him, his name is Big Boy, and he's basically giving him the media is interesting. We could go on a whole tangent with that, but some interviewers really interview people in a way where they almost interrogate them, but they ask them difficult questions. And then other interviewers have a style of asking you a question where they basically give you a question, but they already bake the answer into the question. So they know. So it seemed that Big Boy was eager to make it clear to Kanye that he was not challenging him on his duplicity, that he was instead acknowledging his full-orbed humanity within the question. So it's almost
like he was about to jam Kanye up on how you talking Jesus, Jesus, but saying this, but then he doesn't do that. He gives him an out.
And it's the way he poses the question, he already answered it for Kanye. Okay. And it's interesting because Kanye, we're gonna see what Kanye does with that. Where most people would just say, okay, yeah, he already did all the work for me. All I have to do is say amen to the question / answer that he presented. Well, Kanye does not quite do that.
He's trying to give Kanye an out, and Kanye doesn't take the out.
Yes.
Okay, so let me go ahead and we'll get the Kanye vid. Let me make sure I'm sharing sound. All right, here goes Kanye. Hold on. Need to share sound. All right, here he goes.
Mm-hmm. Jesus still is king, but this is vultures right now. This is where I am.
It is, but I have my issues with Jesus. There's a lot of.
Hold on, because it came on kind of abrupt. The interviewer says he gave. I haven't seen the whole thing, so I'm imagining he kind of gave some of Kanye's recent ratchetness, and then said, "But Jesus still is king." Trying to give trying to let Kanye come in and say, letting
Kanye know, hey, I'm not here to like challenge you in a very in your face way.
Right. So the question is, but Jesus still is king. Here goes Kanye's answer.
Mind you, when he says Jesus still is king, Kanye's response is supposed to be, yeah, absolutely. But check out what happens.
Yeah.
Jesus still is king, but this is vultures right now. This is where I am.
It is, but I have my issues with Jesus. There's a lot of stuff I went through that I prayed and I didn't see Jesus show up. So I had to put my experience in this world, my experience with my children, my experience with other people, my experience with my account, my experience with my brand, and my experience with the level of music that I was dealing with in my own hands. Like a lot of times I just feel like in our society in America, people, Christians, we're depend on Jesus so much that we won't put the word in ourselves. And the main thing that really that I don't rock with is like, it's just always like, I'm gonna pray for you. And it's just like, you can actually physically do something yourself more than just pray. And we're so in this mentality that's all that needs to happen, but we ain't praying our way out of prison. We ain't praying our way out of the abortion clinics. We ain't praying our way to get our land back that was always ours after gentrification, after the Harlem Renaissance and Black Wall Street was burned to the ground.
Wow.
Yeah.
So right away he comes in, not taking the out, not taking the bait. He says, "No, I got issues with Jesus too." It's interesting because we've heard people, even on this very podcast, who came and said, "Hey, I was trusting Jesus to do X, Y, and Z. I thought that if I lived, I was celibate, I didn't have sex before marriage, and I married the right kind of woman, and the things that I believe God would reward, there was no reward for that." And I don't know what Kanye was led to believe, but he was led to believe that, hey, I'm giving my life, I'm giving my family, and this is Kanye really did. I believe this is a whole conversation. We don't know what happens behind closed doors. Kanye really did, I think, make his marriage more complicated by trying to be a Christian, where his wife was not, and trying to live by conservative Christian principles when his wife was not.
Yeah.
So it's not like he didn't take it seriously. But
I think, go ahead.
I'm just saying, so I think he's, I wonder what Christians would say, because I know there's a part of Christians that would say, what does the scripture say? In this world, you will have trouble, right? That's in the Bible.
I looked on TikTok when I saw that video, I looked at the comments and there were a lot of Christians who were they basically thought that was a really bad take from Kanye on the whole matter. And, sure, we can acknowledge it is somewhat narcissistic, but we can also acknowledge some of the truth. I mean, toward the end, he gets less cogent, but there is some truth to what he's saying. He's like, people will pray for things that they can just do themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And your testimony to that yourself, where you said, hey, a lot of what we were considering answers to prayers, at least in your circle, you found that it was just people doing it themselves. Like it was, so on some level, he woke up and smelled the coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And we're not saying that this is a deconversion, because he talked about,
yeah.
he says Christians sometimes will, so he's still including himself in the camp.
But I mean, he also said he has problems with Jesus, which makes me think that he's somehow, when he's saying we, I don't know if we can take that as literally as him saying he's still a Christian. I think he may be just saying he did that thing for a bit, and if you look at his behavior now and you just see, it seems like he's like, all right, I'm kind of taking a different rug. I think this is my guess. He is, I guess, bipolar or whatever, and he has his own issues, but it does seem that he went all in on that, and he thought, okay, this, and then somehow through trial and error, through experience, he's seen that it really doesn't work like he thought it would work. Now, some people would say his expectations were wrong, but that's interesting, because that mirrors what happens when we come to N's book. Like that's always the answer. Is like, oh well, your expectation, or even this other video that, are we going to get around to that other video?
I would rather go right to N's.
I want to do that video though.
Okay.
I still want to do, we can speed through it. But when you see this, that's always the answer. The answer is, look, you have the wrong expectations. You got a straw man of God. You got a straw man of the Bible, et cetera, et cetera. The answer is always that. And let's just go ahead.
I think it's interesting that you say that, because you're right. It does tie into Ends. The problem is always you. Like, imagine you're dating someone and like, yo, this person said they was going to do this. They never do what they say. There's always an excuse. It's always my fault. They always flip it on me. Like, how long can you put up with a relationship like that? And so here you got Kanye. So maybe you can say, yeah, Kanye, it was your expectations. Jesus never said he was going to fix your family. He never said da. He never promised you this. And Kanye said, I got issues with Jesus because he didn't help me here. But it's not just that situation. The Christian life is full of Bible promises, all kinds of things that you're going to find yourself saying, but I thought God was supposed to be like this. I thought I was supposed to expect the truth. I thought I was supposed to know what I believe. And then N's book is going to come and say, no, wanting to know the truth is a sin. Wanting to know for certain that what you believe is true is a sin. Like, wait a minute, you got me into this. Tell me I must confess with my mouth and believe with my heart that Jesus is Lord. I was supposed to be certain about that, wasn't I?
I mean, I can't help but think when you're saying this, that this is like being with a woman or a man where you call them out on their BS and they're just like, yeah, you're just like, yo, you were cheating on me last week. And it's like, no, like you expected me not to cheat. You're the problem because you understand. You're the problem. Your expectations. And you're like, wait a second. I thought we were in a mutually exclusive. No, I never articulated that we were in a mutual. So every disappointment that you find, they find a way to wiggle their way out of it and somehow pin it back on you that you're disappointed, saying that your perception of what the relationship was wrong, and that's why you're disappointed. But it has nothing to do with the fact that they are this person that's unreliable. Right. I feel like it almost feels like an abusive type relationship where you got this cheating spouse or something, And it's funny because in the Bible, and especially in the minor prophets and so forth, God is always comparing Israel as the heart, the cheating spouse. I like the idea of taking it and turning it around here, All
right, we'll go to the second video then.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. This is the guy that we thought we were going to be hearing a lot from, right? This guy, Aaron, who's a Christian, yet seems to have an open enough mind, progressive enough mind to see where the Bible falls off. Is that a good explanation of who this is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a guy who I'm for the record, I just looked out over at the chat and someone San said she says, I find it extremely difficult that you guys are giving screen time to this neo-Nazi anti-Semite. Look, half of the people that we feature in our videos, we vehemently disagree with. Like this live stream started off with a guy preaching and hawking that we totally disagree with. So I guess we've never said this disclaimer before, but playing videos here that we're critiquing is never an endorsement of the people. In fact, it's usually the opposite. So we're critiquing almost everybody that we feature here.
Right, almost everybody. You see Captain Dan over here on the right hand side. Oh, I haven't shared it.
He's rarely being critiqued by us, but
yeah. So, all right. This is. Did I share it yet? Yes, I did. Okay, here he goes. You did. Any setup or just let it play?
Just let it play.
Okay, here he goes.
The quality of a person's atheism is really an effect of the quality. The quality of a person's atheism is really an effect of the quality of their theology. If you have a robust, precise idea of the God you don't believe in, then you can have a good atheism. Take, for example, Graham Oppy, world-leading philosopher of religion. Nobody has done more work on the attributes of God than Graham Oppy. Atheist, right? He's got a good...
Like I said, this is a Christian.
Yeah.
Telling people what it takes to have a good atheism. Just keep that in mind here.
Atheist, right? He's got a good atheism, coherent, justified atheistic worldview, whole package. But if the God you don't believe in is this dumb, irrational, vile, loathsome, evil little cockroach of a God, then you got a bad atheism. Take someone like Richard Dawkins, right? He might be a great popularizer of science and educator, but he can't think his way out of a bag when it comes to philosophy and theology. That's a bad atheism. It's an atheism that doesn't mean hardly anything at all. I don't believe in that kind of God either. Welcome to the club, my brother in Christ. And if that's the only kind of atheism you want, that's totally fine. If you don't want to think about it anymore, that's fine. Love that for you. There are only so many hours in a day. We only have so many brain cells to spare. But you cannot be surprised when you bring that atheism online and throw it in the face of somebody who's thought about their theism for more than a few minutes, and they don't immediately buy into that stupid conception of God that you don't believe in. Why would they?
There he goes with the word stupid.
The fundamentalist to atheist pipeline flows so freely because people grow up in these churches with this terrible theology. Fundamentalist to atheist, they do that. This is why the fundamentalist to atheist pipeline flows so freely, because people grow up in these churches with this terrible theology, and then they get old enough to think about that theology for themselves, and they're like, wait a second.
Hold on, before I let him finish, can we just, he said so much that's worth talking about.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
I always, and this is going to play right into Peter Enns. We're not going to spend a lot of time on Enns tonight, but this is a great setup. He talks about this fundamentalist to atheist pipeline. Because people have this in his mind.
It reminds me, by the way, a lot of what they say, the school to prison pipeline. Yeah. It's like, it's very similar.
He said, basically, this is a diss to two groups of people. He's dissing fundamentalists and he's dissing atheists who are atheists because of fundamentalism.
Yep.
What he's trying to do is he's trying to carve out room for a kind of Christianity that does, like, rather than go from fundamentalist to the wrong kind of atheist, he wants you to go into this kind of like this off-ramp into a more progressive kind of theism. He's trying to make it seem like, because if you do that, then you'll be the better atheist. But really, he doesn't want you to be a better atheist. He wants you to just be a better theist.
He strikes me as somewhat of an elitist, because what he's implying here, these fundamentalists, these fundies are all uneducated. But look at me, I've got my multiple degrees in seminary, and you kind of need this kind of robustness. Now, I know he would probably punch back at that and say, hey, that's not what I'm saying. But in order to have the kind of nuance he's trying to approach the text with, You show me a bunch of working class dungaree wearing farmers that have that kind of understanding.
We didn't discuss this video, but doesn't he have a video where he says most Christians are not even going to be able to understand the kind of progressive theology?
Yeah, he said that in response to a question where a person said, okay, because he's so nuanced with his handling, right? That it has led to people to say, all right, well, do you recommend a good commentary, Bible commentary? And he says, you look, basically, he goes on to tell them, no, in order to do that, it would be too dense for the layperson. And then later he does another video. I didn't tell you about this, but I watched the next video that he did to respond, because the person was like, look, he's like, because his objection was the commentaries would be very expensive and they would be very dense educationally and probably over the head of lay people. And I sent you the video and I'm like, what kind of religion do you have if that's what your response to, like, having and so the person who he responded to with that video said, no, I'm here for it. I have the money. I want to invest it. And basically, quite frankly, I think I'm up for the task of the challenge. So he then doesn't name a single commentary, but he goes down this laundry list of just like dense books. He's like, okay, now this person is the person to get for Esther. This is the person to get for this person and this person. Now they're very nuanced in this way on the Deuteronomic code, etc. By the time you got through the video, you're like, you literally have to be. This basically has to be your profession for you to even have any understanding of it. Anyway, this is such a segue, but just understand, he's essentially saying that what he thinks of as fundy is, I think he has a large fundy category, right? When I say fundy, fundamentalist. I think when he's saying fundamentalist, it covers a large swath of what we consider to be American evangelicalism. I don't think it's a small portion of it. And there's something very elitist about his position. It sounds like he's saying, like, yo, unless you have the kind of education I have and you're the kind of, anyway, I'm going too far with this.
Yeah. So, but the idea though is, unless you are the kind of Christian that he is, that has all these nuances, one, you're not the right kind of Christian.
Yeah.
You're not even worshiping the right kind of God. Of course, he wouldn't want that kind of God either. The God who would maybe flood the earth during the days of Noah, or the God who would, command a genocide. Or maybe he doesn't even have that kind of God. He's got a nuanced way to get around that. But he's saying, if you're like Richard Dawkins, of course you'd hate that kind of God. So does he.
Yeah.
But then if you could be a better theologian, then you could even be a better atheist. The Graham Oppie kind of atheist.
Yeah.
It's basically it's a weird flex.
It is a sort of like, people throw around no true Scotsman so much, but I'm listening to him and I'm hearing this is like no true Scots God. So it's like he doesn't want to give you credit whenever you reject the God that you're confronted with in scripture. He doesn't want to give you credit for actually, he's going to always say that's a straw man. The guy that you're rejecting there, the God that you're rejecting isn't the God of scripture. So that ultimately the God that, it has to be the God he has in mind for him to assent to it and say, this is, and it's a very specific.
It is. Basically what he's saying is, you're not qualified to leave the faith. You're not qualified to be a skeptic, to be a critic, unless you've done the work that he's done. And so you just sitting in your room doing Bible study say, wait,
what he considers to be a figment of your imagination, he calls it stupid, but he's not calling you directly stupid, but because this is a figment of your imagination, there's sort of an indirect, this is the same way you tell me not to use stupid, then I listen to him and I'm saying, I think I get it now. Because what he's saying is, he's essentially calling Richard Dawkins, who's like this brilliant scientist, he's calling him stupid for reading the text and taking it somewhat at face value, on his own terms, He's saying that's stupid. You can't do this.
And by extension, to the person who's just trying to be a faithful Christian, reading their Bible, but then having questions and seeing it be non sequitur, that person, he would say to them, yeah, I hear you, but you're not even qualified to have the doubts you have until you've done the study that I've done, basically.
Yeah. No, so I guess we should let him finish up, man.
Okay.
What do you think?
I'll take him back and let him finish. It's only 20 seconds.
Okay. Yep.
a theology for themselves, and they're like, wait a second, this is stupid, and then they leave those churches, which is the right thing to do. They ought to do that. That's not a mistake. But then sometimes they go on to make the mistake of thinking.
So he encourages people to leave the kinds of churches that are teaching these fundamentalist things. So he's all for your deconstruction.
Yeah.
But he's not for your deconversion, because he thinks, like I said, there's this little shoots and like ladder. Like if you just take this little right turn at this point, you'll end up in, and I think this is sort of what what's the guy's name? Mike Jones from Inspiring Philosophy, right? Catholic, but a lot of Christians find themselves going to him because he's got those nuances that make it seem like, oh, I could still believe it if I just do this, if I just turn it this way. Yeah. I'll take him back just a little bit more so we can hear him, let him close out on his own terms here.
They ought to do that. That's not a mistake.
They ought to leave those churches.
But then sometimes they go on to make the mistake of thinking the theology I was raised with is the only theology that's out there. It's a natural mistake to make. I sympathize with that mistake, but it's a mistake nonetheless.
So it's wild because it's like, once again, it's blaming the victim. It's blaming you. It's you think, and this is what the guys the first guys who did the critique of my book, they told me on camera, at least, you think that's not God's fault. That's not the Bible's fault. That's your theology. That's your evangelical Western da. You need to leave that. And I'm like, okay, why is it all on me to find the right version of this thing to believe, to find the right theology, to find the right, why is it all my responsibility? At what point does God ever get off the throne and speak for himself, take the witness stand, as we said, and lead, not lead a person to, hey, here's what I want you to believe for this period of your life, but then in 5 more years, you're gonna come out, you're gonna shed that snake skin and end up being a different kind of Christian.
Yeah.
Like it's always your fault for not believing right, for not learning right, for thinking that your theology was the only kind of theology. When is it ever God's fault?
It's one of the things that came to mind when you talked to Jennifer Bird, and she started explaining the dynamics of biblical marriage, and you start realizing, wow, it's not so much just the subject of biblical marriage. Then you start realizing, wow, there was the phrase lost in translation. It really applies, because you start realizing you can take something that we take for granted, like wife or wedding, in the Bible. And when you actually start trying to analyze it and on its own terms for what it means, it's not an easy thing to translate into in English for an American audience, because what they meant by that and what we mean by that are two different things. We don't even have a word really to encapsulate what they mean, So then you start realizing that the work you have to do just for something as simple as what we think is simple as a wedding or a wife or something, the work you have to do to understand it in its original context is immense. It's immense. And that's just one concept. That's not, we're not talking about joint and marrow kind of division. We're not talking about very complex doctrinal stuff. We're saying just understanding how to translate the word that they translate as wife in English, how to do justice to what it meant in its original context. We can't even do that justice. It ends up we end up glossing over the actual meaning when we do it. And so when you see that we're dealing with just to tie that in with what Jennifer was talking about, and just in general, this giving, like we've said it before, giving us this religion that's dependent on a book that was given to us in a different language many hundreds or thousands of years ago is the worst way you could have given us revelation.
This is why I asked the question: if you're standing beside God in heaven and I'm in hell, you turn to God and you say, is there nothing more you could have done, God, to convince Brady that this was true, knowing what his doubts were? Is there nothing more you could have done? God says one of two things. I did all I could, which begs a lot of questions. Like, that was all you could do, was give me an ancient book with all these issues? Or No, I could have done more, which begs the other question. So then why didn't you?
Yeah.
Let's go to ends. Let's go to Peter
It,
ends.
it, it, it's almost like he has cursed a thinker. Like the curse of the person is to be born a person who's just inclined to think antithetically. Because if that's your disposition, you're going to have problems with this thing. Like, but if you're a guy who there's a low bar for you believing things and thinking something's credible, you're going to get along just fine here.
You said this. You said this months and months ago. You said Jesus rewards credulity, and that's what we have here. But well, let's go to, because this idea of Jesus rewards credulity, this is basically what Peter Enns is going to argue for. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to dive in to Peter Enns, the sin of certainty. And I promise you guys, we're not going to be long in this. We tortured Jay Witt last week. Can I just be honest here, Jay Witt?
Yeah, go ahead.
Jay Witt called me up a few days after last week's episode and said, "Hey, do we have to spend a lot of time in Peter Enns' book?"
I told Albert I thought it was the worst live we did, right? I had no. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think last week's live was bad at all. I enjoyed it, but it was torture for Jay Witt because Peter Enns. Can you just give us a real quick synopsis, real quick, because we got to get into this. Why was it so much torture for you, or why is it so much torture for you to think about even spending more time in this book, The Sin of Certainty?
Yeah, I spent so much time reading theology and the Bible when I was a Christian that it was a huge relief. That was one of the things I felt a burden off of my shoulders, because I felt like no matter what else I was, and mind you, I wasn't a person who just read theology. I read secular books and stuff too. But I felt like I had this obligation to read a certain amount of theology in the Bible every day. And one of the huge reliefs I had when I left Christianity was now I could kind of just read what I wanted to read. So now having to, a decade later, having to pick up a book where a guy is talking about stuff that I've dismissed a decade ago, like wholesale, I just have no interest. Like, and I guess that sounds like a very simple.
But on Sundays, this is a short plug. This coming Sunday, we will be back for our second our second not church service. But on Sundays, we're going through Romans. Why is that not as taxing as reading Peter Enns?
Well, there's several things, because in preparation for Sunday, we literally, if you hear me quoting scriptures or anything, I'm shooting off the hip. I have to do no preparation.
That's coming from memory.
That's memory, and that. Come on, I take no script with me.
We lost your mic for a second.
I said, come on here. I take no script with me. Come on. He gives me the words to say extemporaneously. That's the only way I want it. I want it the old Pentecostal way. So with this thing, I find that it's taking more, like, say for instance, I want to listen to some music. You don't want to give any more
of your time.
I don't want to give. I've already lost years in religion. The idea of sitting down, reading, or listening to some nonsense about religion, if I'm not getting giggles off of it, it's kind of hard.
But I would imagine you could get giggles off of.
No, I'm not. I'm just not.
I got tons of them. So let's dive into it.
Yeah, let's dive into it. Yeah.
All right. So we're going to do chapter 2 of Peter Enns' book, The Sin of Certainty. Before we dive into chapter 2, there was one thing from last week that I thought we need to hit on, because it sets up what we're going to talk about tonight. All right. So I'm going to share my screen. And this is important because for a lot of people, a book like this, if not this very book, is their last stop before deconversion. Peter Enns makes them feel like it's safe and necessary to deconstruct, but you don't have to deconvert. You can stay here. This is the last little haven before you get out. And so that's why we're dealing with this book. So here it goes.
I will follow your lead, Brady.
Okay. All right. So this is on page 25, at least in the Kindle version.
Yep.
He's just giving you this is the end of chapter 1. And he talks about what each chapter is going to be about. Chapter 1 is this. Chapter 2 is this. 3, 4, 5, 6. Here's what he says about chapter 7, the last chapter of the book, Well, no, not the last chapter. I'm sorry. Chapter 7. He says, we'll end by looking at how God's absence is God's way of addressing the sin of certainty. Listen to that, y'all. He says, we're going to end this book by looking at how God's absence is God's way of addressing the sin of certainty, to cultivate in us a habit of trust that doesn't depend on certainty to survive. This, to me, is very, very diabolical, because what it does is it dignifies and sanctifies all the worst parts of religion. Remember when we first started tonight, we talked about how the obviousness of the con is you can't get the thing you're being promised until after you die. Well, he's going to make that part of the con its most salient feature. God's absence is how he's going to address your sin of certainty. Now you can never be certain because he's hid himself behind the curtain.
Yeah.
And that's the best thing about this, because now you have to trust him. Now you have to grow in your dependence on him. He's made the bug of the thing a feature of the thing. And you should now go and celebrate it.
Yeah, he's made faith and doubt symbiotic. You know?
Say more.
Well, I mean, it's almost like I think of the way our stomachs function, how there are certain bacteria that live in our stomach that help us actually with our digestion, in a sense. Something of that sort. How a thing that you would think is going to be deleterious to your faith is now a feature of it.
It's a necessary thing, a necessary component.
Yeah, he's made it a feature of it, and so and in such a way, when you insulate it that way, it becomes even harder to dismantle a thing when it's insulated in that way, because it's the person who's in the rainstorm, stuck in the mud with their tires, and every time they press the accelerator for the gas, the tires just dig them deeper into the ditch instead of getting them out.
And imagine someone coming and telling you, be thankful for that.
Like
that's what he's doing. Beware, for the person who's watching this and you're trying to, like, you're on the fence, beware of anyone who comes along and tries to make the fact that you have doubts a good thing.
Yep. You're just pressing the gas, and now, like, you will never get out of the ditch at this point, because the harder you press on that gas, the harder the less apparent he is. That's going to be more apparent that's him.
Wow. The more absent God is, the more present he is. That's what he's saying to you. That's the bullshit that's being shoved your way. The more absent God is, the more present he is.
It reminds me of 1984, the book 1984, where they changed language up in such a way where things meant their exact.
But no, think about how duplicitous this is, right?
Yeah.
Because if I am feeling doubt, that's a feeling. I can sense my doubt.
That's
and then
faith.
someone comes along and tells me, hey, that doubt you're feeling, that God's absence, that's his presence. But now every time I feel doubt, I'm going to call my doubt God. I felt God today. How? I doubted. Like, what?
You've just turned the meaning of things on its head.
Right.
And it's like, yes, now every time I push the accelerator of doubt or absence, let's say absence, the wheels begin to spin, and that absence ends up digging me deeper into my faith instead of being the thing where
that absence is presence. That absence was God drawing you closer to him.
Exactly. So I'm just digging myself deeper, and what you will find yourself, if you can make yourself believe that, you will find that you have a faith that's inescapable, and maybe that's the whole point.
Well,
here.
It's like the joke. You ever have somebody do this to you and you want to punch them in the face? Somebody pulls up, maybe you're waiting for a ride, they pull up, you go to open the door, and then they move a couple feet further, And you're like, yo, stop playing. You go to open the door, and then they move a couple feet first, and they keep
Yeah.
doing this and laughing. Like, that's what he's basically saying, is your
Mhm.
inability to grab a hold of God, the fact that he keeps moving seemingly out of your grasp.
It's a carrot on a stick.
Right.
In front of the donkey.
Yeah.
You know, like just go on, keep chasing.
Right.
Go on and keep on chasing. You're never going to get it.
The fact that you can never grasp, he wants you to prize, he wants you to hold on to the fact that you can never grab on. That's it's the most unbelievable thing that he's saying this. Hold on to the fact that you can't grab on.
And just realize that if you can bring yourself, now granted, maybe you're a venerable person if you can make yourself believe. Maybe I should be you, because I can't see for the life of me how you could get yourself to believe this. But if you can get yourself to believe this, you are now in a situation where you've thoroughly insulated yourself. What if God's absence isn't enough, like however he means it, whether he means it in terms of the subjective testimony or whether he means it in terms of just showing up in your life in some way, if however you mean absence, if that is proof of his presence, please tell me how you could ever find your way out of this situation.
Not only that, which absence?
Yeah.
Because the Christian God seems hard to grasp and seems absent from the doubting Christian. But what about the person who's not even a Christian? The Christian God is uber absent to the Muslim. He's uber absent to the Hindu. Is that absence also God's presence in their life?
I just had a revelation just now thinking through this, and I'm like, he got this from the text. Because he says, my grace is sufficient for you, and my strength is made perfect in weakness. So the faith is set up in such a paradoxical way. So it's like, look, you think that you're weak. That's when I give you the grace to be strong. Like I use the foolishness of the cross to confound the wise. You know, and I remember as a believer, we used to marvel and rejoice over this great holy these paradoxes. He's the lion and the lamb kind of thing, you know. And I'm like, well, I guess it makes sense that a guy might rationalize this and say, well, you know, he's absent. That's his presence, and it's in keeping with, you know, a certain kind of way of understanding the world that the Bible presents us with, right? I mean, would you agree?
I agree, and it cultivates the believer's mind to live with these antinomies, so that if you run into somebody who actually is doubting, and they stop buying into these antinomies, they stop buying into these two contrary things that you're trying to say are true at the same time. You look at them like they're the foolish one. When they're actually coming to their senses.
Well, you know, Paul says this. He talks about how, like, basically, they have a different kind of wisdom. They have an unworldly wisdom. They have a different way. So that you really get to defy, basically, logic in your understanding of the way things should function. And you look at it, you find you said this was it 2 weeks. I think it was during our last Sunday service where you said, like, the Bible basically trains people to think in these ways. Like,
Albert said that. I said that off of what Albert said, because Albert challenged us, saying we look at Paul's therefores and we assume therefore there must be logic there. But Kim said, if you slow down and look at the therefores, you realize that it doesn't really connect. It doesn't make sense. And then I said, so imagine if you frame your worldview based on therefores that don't really connect.
Yeah, it makes sense that you would not require of your religion certain kinds of cogency.
Right.
And that, who would have think that we could tie our Sunday service into this? But it is directly applicable, because I see in his paradoxical understanding of
God's absence is God's presence.
That was one of the dimensions of deconstructions that we,
the hiddenness of God.
Yeah. The hiddenness of God. So he takes something that we consider to be something that's you're heading out, and he flips it on its head and turns it into this paradox that's ironically God showing up. Like his hiddenness is actually him showing up.
Hey, let's go. Let's dive back in because we got a few minutes here. Let's try to get somewhere with this.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in the chapter 2 now. I should at least give the title of the chapter, shouldn't I? Chapter 2 is called How We Got in This Mess. And he's basically going to talk about how Christians began to commit the sin of certainty. Why did we want to become so certain in the first place? All right. So I'm only going to read a few of my highlights here because I don't want to torture Jay Witt more than necessary.
You got a lot of highlights here. You brother.
I'm going to be selective of the highlights. But look at that first one. That first one just gave us a whole, on ramp. So
yeah.
But he starts off like this. Tell me if you agree. I think this could be a whole episode. So let's try to find a way to get in and get out of this real quick. He says, few of us, if any, truly come to faith in God by sheer force of an argument. We come to faith for all sorts of reasons that aren't really reasons at all in the conventional sense. Our reasons are intuitive more than rational, emotional more than logical, mysterious more than known. So he's basically saying we don't really come to God for reasons. We come to God because of some kind of internal, he says, I would say that coming to faith involves sensing God's presence, which may transcend or even defy our ability to rationally process the encounter. And I'm just going to be honest. I did not come to God like that. I didn't have some mystical experience.
You weren't born again. Come on, somebody.
I feel his presence in this place. And I've had moments where I felt things. Oh, is that his presence? But I felt.
Yeah. See, Brady. You thought that you could know God exhaustively. See, that's why you're out here now.
He's going to say you thought that you could know God intellectually, and I'm not saying I came to God for purely intellectual reasons, but I did quote unquote come to God because I read something in the Bible that made me believe there was a person, a divine person who was responsible for our world. And this person was telling us how he made the world.
I mean, Jesus says, go and teach all nations. Like,
teach them everything that I taught you.
What are you going to teach them? You're going to basically teach. Oh, I get it. I understand now. You're going to teach them that you can't know shit.
Right. That's what he ends up saying. But look, I came to God for reasons. I read a verse in the Bible that made me think there's a divine, eternal person. I didn't know theology. I didn't know attributes of God. I just got the impression from Psalm 90 that God was eternal, and I could not beat this eternal person, so I better join him. And I said, well, this eternal person is telling us about how he made the world, why he made the world. That means I get to know why I'm here.
But what do you say to him when he says, look at where you're at now? You didn't have that's not a real encounter.
Okay, all I'm saying is I came to God for reasons. I thought the Bible was giving me reasons and answers to the deep burning questions that I didn't even know I had.
You came to God in sin because you came to God for certainty.
Well, and I wouldn't even say I came for certainty, but I did come for answers. Like I said, and not even answers to questions that I was asking. I didn't even know I was asking those. I read the Bible and it answered questions that I wasn't asking.
And I hear Aaron saying, saying you were a fundamentalist. Aaron, the guy we played earlier, you're saying that's fundamentalistic.
Maybe. But either way, what Enz is saying here is, he says most people don't come to God for reasons. We come to God because we have some kind of.
I think I agree with Enz here. I think this is probably the one time I agree with him.
Really?
Yes. I think. I'm trying to look at his wording here. I would say that coming really reasons at all in the conventional sense are, go scroll up a little. Is he referring to most of us? I think he's talking about
He
many
said
people.
few,
Few.
if any,
Yes, yeah.
truly come to faith.
Okay, so yeah, so he's qualifying it negatively, but basically by saying few, he's saying most people
right
don't come for reasons.
But if this is
more.
if you agree with him, answer me this: why did we do evangelism? We weren't
No,
going
I mean,
out saying, "Hey, come experience the presence of God."
No, I like I said, this is why I think when you present people with the facts that don't line up with the text, I said this to you before. I've said this many times, that the reason why they don't immediately get out of the faith the way we did is that a lot of times the reason why they're in there isn't because they're there because it all makes sense. They're there for other reasons. They have
I
things.
disagree with that.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's right.
But see,
I mean,
because here's the thing:
know,
as an evangelist, right? We went around giving people, what do we say? There's no good news without bad news. We gave people the bad news.
Yeah, but I think you're analyzing this one. See, I know you well enough. We talk a lot, and I know how you think. But I think you're superimposing a certain way that you think onto large mass. I think, yes, I think there's a sense in which a lot of people, they believe the basic propositions, like, Christ died, Christ died, the Apostles' Creed type stuff.
The gospel.
yeah,
Right?
essentially, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I don't think that Enns is trying to overturn that. Maybe he is, but I don't think he's trying to overturn that. But at the same time, I think that what he's getting at here, this is why writing stuff down is not the best way to communicate things, right? Because what I'm taking from what Enns is saying here is something different from what you're taking. Okay. What I take here is that Enns is saying, yes, you assent to those things, but you're driven to the faith more intuitively by an irrational process. That's what I get. That's what I gather.
He says our reasons are intuitive more than rational,
yes.
emotional more than logical, mysterious more than known.
That's what I'm trying to.
When we ask people to give their testimonies, how many people say it's a mystery? I don't know why I'm a Christian. He says the reasons why people come to faith are mysterious more than known.
Yeah, I think I agree with them. I think I agree.
But if that's the case, what is a testimony? If it's mysterious more than known.
Yeah, but I don't think I would want to press him for more than what he's actually saying. I don't think he's negating the objective propositions of Christ, like I said, Apostles' Creed type stuff. I believe what he's saying is the thing that drives you to those things often is more intuitive and it's more emotional than it is. So it's the appeal, like, for instance, even within the charismatic presentation, that is Christ's death, burial, resurrection, it's an appeal to people understanding the magnitude of God's love and feeling that it's almost like they were pricked to the heart, a term or phrase from Acts. Having those things presented to you in such a way where it touches you on an emotional level where you're like, oh, God loved me this much. He died for me. That's the emotional thing. And I think, yeah, so you have in the self-same act, you have a propositional element, but then you also have—
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying is that it's not divorced from the propositions. It's not divorced from, there's some content to my faith. It's not just I had faith one day. I had faith.
What I hear him saying, what I hear him saying is that if you don't have that emotional response to that, you don't come into faith most times. That's what I'm hearing. Now, whether you agree with me or not, that's a whole other matter. But that's what I'm hearing. You're
helping them, which I mean, okay.
And when I hear that, I'm like, yes, it tracks with what I see when I talk to people who are in the faith, and I'm like, yo, look at this, look at Noah's Ark, look at this, and they're still in there. It's because they're not in there because of all of those facts about history or whatever. They're there because of other things, like the feeling they get when they get on their knees and pray or whatever. Anyway, I don't want to beat this dead horse. I don't want to do that.
All good. I'm going to speed past this. Once again, he keeps labeling correct thinking as the problem. The desire for correct thinking is the problem. We do not come to faith lining up our thoughts and then venturing forth. And once again, I say, if that's the case, why were we giving people gospel presentations? We don't line up our faith and then venture forth. And so why should it ever cross our minds that preoccupation with correct thinking is able or necessary to keep us there? So he's basically, like I said last week, he's prying the believer's hands.
See, I'm. It's funny. I've taken a total turn from last week. Like, I am feeling him on this in the sense of I think he's taking something that is true about a lot of people and he's taking it to an illogical conclusion. So what he's saying is, because you're really not there, why not just turn all of the whole, and then that'll help you get over the evolution and all this other stuff. You say, like, that's what I hear him saying. I hear him saying, look, if you can level with yourself and realize that you're not here because of proposition, ultimately you're here because of an intuition-based emotive response, then can you accept the fact that going forward, you don't need to be kept here by these sorts of logical conclusions and rationale, that you can kind of continue on. In other words, how could you have it like what Paul says in Galatians, having started with faith, now you're going to try to justify yourself by works? How like, no. And I'm saying he's making a similar kind of argument. He's saying, if you came in here intuitively and emotively, why are you going to now trying to turn rationality on and stay? How can you expect to stay in on rationality? Come on, somebody.
I would agree with you that that's what he's doing, but I think it's disingenuous because I do not think, especially the kind of Christian that he was even. He talks about this in chapter 1. The kind of Christian that he was.
Brady, I was just preaching. I was literally just preaching some shit that I don't even believe. I said, come on here.
But here's why he's being disingenuous. The kind of Christian that he was not even a kind of Christian where propositions didn't matter. He became that kind of Christian. And now he's making it seem like, isn't that what we all are? People that don't really care about what we believe. We just know that we believe. And we need to keep on believing.
No, honestly, I see his point. He's saying, if the reason you're here, if now this doesn't work for you or me, because we got out once we saw certain things. But if the reason if you can trace your origin story to emotiveness or intuition or something like that,
or mystery.
Why the hell should it have to make sense for, like, you can let go of the Adam and Eve literal story and all this stuff. You can continue in the same way, like Paul said in Galatians, having begun this way in intuition and emotion, you can continue this way.
Right. But and that's the question. Maybe we could do a poll in the chat. Maybe you guys can answer in the chat. How many of you came to your faith in Christ, your Christian faith when you were one? How many of you came for emotional, mysterious reasons, as opposed to hearing a message that made what you thought was spiritual sense to you? And you saw your need for a savior, and Jesus was it. Maybe you thought prophecies were fulfilled, whatever it is. You had more reasons than just the emotive, irrational.
Yeah. This is honestly, reasons. This second look at his writing and thoughts has given me not I don't appreciate it, but it's like, I want to preach his sermon for him. Come on here.
It's all good.
You came in on intuition. You're going to switch over to reason now? Don't ask me why I switched into some Southern accent.
But what is that? Is that 2 Peter 3:16? 1 Peter 3:16? Where he talks about having a reason and being able to give you a reason. Like, there's nothing about the Christian faith that is reasonless. So I don't understand why he or you could make it seem like the emotions. I agree that there is emotion there, but we often talk about being what? Broken. You find yourself at the foot of the cross. You feel the weight of your sin. It's not just some mysterious, I don't know why I'm crying. I don't know why I'm giving my life. There were reasons.
But Brady, Galatians 3. having begun, like, let's go back to the
But
old
if you
landmark.
but if you didn't begin that way,
Well, now
this
see,
is
that's
making it seem like everyone
Brady,
begins that way.
Brady, he's not talking to you. He's not talking to you. And guess what? He's not talking to me either. But he's talking
he's not
to
even
that.
talking about himself.
I don't know.
He gave his story. His story was not, I had an emotional.
Well, here it is, Brady. Are you going to take the man at his own words? Or are you going to make his words conform to what you think? Because he's saying here, he says we. Now, the other time when you saw we, was it when Kanye said we, you wanted to say, well, he's including himself as well, why can't you consider him saying we here to include, come on here.
Because he was more general. He says few, if any. He doesn't talk about where he is in that, but
he says we do not come to faith. Like, is he not in that we?
All right. So if that's the case, you all in the chat can tell us, did you need to see things line up? Did it need to make sense for you? Even if you realize now that you were not reasoning too well, but you still saw some logic to it.
Now, mind you, for those who are listening and they're just overly annoyed with Jay Witt at this point, understand this is what true steel manning is. I don't agree with this nonsense. This is bullshit. But if you're going to read a guy, at least try to understand him. See, this is what they didn't do. This is the reason why I'm on this fucking podcast now. Because the people who read Brady's book, they weren't willing to do what I'm doing to Ends right now.
Yeah.
They read him in the most uncharitable voice that they could find to read him in. Here, I actually believe this is what Ends is, and I'm actually thinking I'm understanding. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but I think I understand what he's trying to communicate. And what he's trying to say is that the average Christian is not there primarily. This is a paraphrase because he didn't say this, but it's not primarily because of propositional truth or reason or rationale. The average Christian is there more intuitively and more emotionally.
Can I just tweak that though? You're doing a great job still manning him. I think it would be more accurate to say the average Christian does not stay in the faith for those reasons. But I do think more times than not, people are coming to the faith for reasons, not for feelings.
I don't disagree with you, Brady, but I think you're leaning. I'm not trying to speak to what you're just saying. I agree with you. And I think that might be true for some of them, but I do believe I will give Ends this. He's probably speaking to a large mass of people who don't give a shit about all of this, the things making sense. Like I remember talking to one believer about Noah's Ark, the story of Noah's Ark. Now, some people think this is fundamentalistic and it's nonsense that I even mentioned it. But I remember saying to a guy, I was like, just consider that if you got water up that high, it's all frozen. Like if you're taking it literally. This person who was a fundamentalist himself and believes it. So in other words, this isn't a person who thinks, oh, it's a local flood or something like that. This is a person who would have believed it literally. He was just able to he was not bothered by that at all. Like the fact that it would defy the laws of nature. And that conversation, I realized, his commitment to this, because it's not that he had some other kind of more scientific understanding of the world or something, and he had a more nuanced, he wasn't Aaron from this that we just played a video. He wasn't this guy with this kind of super liberal understanding of the text. He was a fundamentalist. But when confronted with the facts that did not actually cohere with his understanding of the text, he was unscathed.
But I think you're proving my point, because the guy that you're talking about, I don't think he would have come into the faith with those kinds of arguments against the faith. It was once he was already in that arguments against the faith lost their strength.
But what I'm saying is his commitment to it wasn't irrational. It wasn't like, it has to make sense. It was like,
how deep was he in at that point though? He wasn't a year or two in.
Well, what I'm saying is what he's leaning on, and if you talk to the guy now, he's leaning on experiences, emotional experiences that he's had. He's not leaning on whether or not the story, even though he's basically a fundamentalist. He's not leaning on a fundamentalistic, like literal interpretation of historical passages. He's leaning primarily. Come on, man. You said, was it Michael Brown? When the rubber meets the road, he's like, look, man.
Right. My experiences.
Like behind the closed doors, I mean, he's like, yeah, we're doing all this apologetics-ish on Facebook, but, come on, man. Like, at the end of the day, I spoke in tongues or whatever. I mean, what you expect me to do? Like, that's what's going on. You know what I'm saying? And I think all I'm saying here is that ends this isn't scientific. So how large this mass of people is that believe this way, I don't know what the numbers are. But I do believe he's adequately describing a lot of people. Okay. And the thing that he's now doing, he's saying, if you can acknowledge that that's how you ended up where you're at. If you can acknowledge that, however important propositional truth was, it was secondary to this emotional or intuitive response.
Well, I will say this, and to anybody who's on the fence with faith, I get a lot of people talking about the experiences that they've had or that they've heard or that they've seen. And one of the things that ends up happening is what ends is not doing here. You end up having to become critical of the experiences that you've had. You will never leave the faith. You will never find yourself on the other side of that door. Just as critical as you've become of the scripture, you need to become just that critical of your experiences. The time that you felt like you heard God speak to you, the visions that you had, you saw.
Now, this is where my critique of ends comes in, because I don't doubt his observation, but then I step back and I say, look, that's something we need to be healed of. We need to be healed of a lot. Now, it's tricky because some of our most important commitments in life are not rational in that way, like our commitment to our loved ones and family, etc. We defy, like they say, your main instinct is self-survival, but people have regularly sacrificed their own life to save their children. The woman whose family is burning up in a house and she runs into there to grab her kids.
It's not irrational. We've had people who've done all sorts of, like, putting the magnifying glass on what it is about the human condition that causes you to look out for the people that are in your close circle as opposed to people who are further from you, and even altruism. You could trace the rationality. It's not
no. I don't want what I'm saying to be misunderstood. I'm not saying that you can't follow a line of reason that makes sense. I'm saying that when they respond to it, it's instinctive and intuitive, but they're not going through a bunch of propositions based on propositions to get them to the point where they're running into a burning house to rescue. They're actually just acting on their intuition, which is exactly what Enns was saying. Like they're acting emotionally or intuitive. Now, it might make sense. You might be able to trace that evolution, but I'm saying this person is I'm further making the remark that most of our most important commitments in life are not the kinds of things that we come to necessarily based on working the rationale out thoroughly. And it's, in other words, what I'm saying is where we found ourselves is basically counterintuitive to rationalize our way out of something that we're very, that's very important to us, like a religion.
Well, there's a meme that speaks to this. It says, you can't reason someone out of something that they were not reasoned into. And I always take some sort of issue with that because, once again, maybe there are many people who were not reasoned into the faith. Yeah. But I think there are very many people who were reasoned into the faith. And to me, their faith was no less faithful. They may have added experiences on top of it or what have you. But to make it seem like the base level of faith is reasonless, I think that's even anti-biblical. I think it's unbiblical.
Well, look, I would agree with you, but I'm just saying, I think that what ends is trying to do, if you remember what he said in the first chapter, maybe it was later in the third chapter, but he talks about how, no, it was the first chapter. He talked about the blows that Christianity took because of science and archaeology, all
That's
kinds.
this chapter. That's this chapter.
Yeah, that's this chapter.
2.
So he goes on to show that, you know, this stuff is not going to hold up. A lot of this stuff just doesn't hold up. And these are the reasons why we left. And so what's the way forward for a Christian who's written a book, who's admitting that the science is off, Adam and Eve's not real, and so forth, et cetera, et cetera. He goes down the list. And what is the way forward for the person who says, I'm going to stay in the faith? Well, for him, it's leaning on the fact that those things were never as important as maybe you thought they were. Now, maybe you disagree, and I disagree with him on that. I do disagree. That's why I left. But I think that he said he's like really seizing that kernel. It's like the mustard seed of faith, like in a sense. He's saying that it's a mustard seed of intuition and emotion that he's making. He's turning it into this huge tree. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Even though it's the smallest of seeds, it becomes this thing that you can build your whole life on. You know?
For the sake of time, I'm just going to read one more quote. We really got into the second page of this chapter. This last quote, I'm only going to read this one because I hear it so often. And I didn't know. Now, maybe there are other people saying this and it's not just ends. But when I read this, I said, this is where they're getting it from. I've heard this from so many people.
Yeah.
Christians who they're not even thinking about deconverting because they've been talked out of thinking it matters that they have correct thoughts about God, about what God has done in history, about what God's going to do in the future. Having correct thoughts about that doesn't even matter. And here's what Enns says. He says, the stumbling block here is our modern Western rational
I remember
mindset.
this. Yes. Yep.
So anybody, like if you're listening, whenever you hear this, just know this is somebody trying to dumb you down. This is somebody who's trying to get you to shut your brain off.
Ravi Zacharias used to use that a lot.
What do you mean?
I think I've heard him use the same kind of rationale. I think he ended up using the elephant illustration. You've heard it, where it's like, people go ahead. No, we don't. Yeah, we don't need to. We don't need to go there.
So he says,
I've heard.
The stumbling block here is our modern Western rational mindset. Once again, it's your fault.
Yeah.
It's not God. It's not God's book. It's not God's prophet. It's you. Mindset, which has put on a golden throne our capacity for rational thinking, our ability to know and explain our reality through our thoughts. Don't misunderstand me. I value these God-given, so he's going to big up and admit, God gave us this ability, these gifts that we have, but they're the problem. God is, somebody messaged me on Facebook today, private message, somebody who deconverted, who was a cross movement fan back in the day and all that. But I said, hey, why'd you deconvert? He said, the more I began to analyze the Bible, it seemed like God was the cause of his own problems. All the problems that God has had with humanity, be it Adam and Eve, be it us today, whatever, be it our free will, be it what he's determined, it seems like God is the cause of all his own problems. And that basically is what Enns has said here. The stumbling block is the way that we think. But don't misunderstand me. These are God-given abilities. So then who's really at fault here? Is it us and the way we think? Is it God for putting this mind in our heads? Like, he's talking out both sides of his mouth. But all he's really trying to get the reader, the doubting Christian, to do is give up this search.
Well, I mean, we keep coming back to Kant, man. We keep coming back to Kant.
I was trying to not do that, but yes.
We keep coming back to the noumenal phenomenal distinction.
Yes.
And there's a real sense in which, whether or not, I can't imagine a man like him isn't aware of this. And it's sort of him saying, like, you basically have to place your faith in this other category, because it wasn't as though Kant was an atheist or anything. And you have to if it is protected, it's sealed off. I think of it like when they seal food with those plastic seals that take all of the air out of them so that it keeps longer. It's like you're able to preserve your faith more efficiently if you can kind of put this hermetic seal on it and not allow whatever function, like,
Not
the
allow
function
your
of,
God-given abilities to think and be rational to
yeah.
address your
Now,
faith.
understand he's saying God-given abilities. He's being facetious when he's saying this, but you're also quoting
No,
ends
I don't think he
essentially.
is.
No, I'm
Oh
saying
no.
you're being facetious,
Oh
but
yeah,
you're quoting ends.
I'm quoting ends. Oh, it's
Yeah,
not on the
yeah,
screen
yeah,
anymore.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah,
I'm sorry. I
yeah,
forgot to share it. I'm sorry.
yeah. No, don't
Let
worry
me,
about it.
I want
It's
them to
good.
see that this is not me just talking. This is
Yeah,
ends saying this. I thought I
yeah.
forgot that I
So
stopped sharing.
if you can cleanly bifurcate your rationality and your faith in this kind of way, you can get on with life and not have this conflict. And so he's saying, stop expecting of your religion or your faith the kinds of things you expect in other areas of life, and you won't find yourself disappointed.
Yeah. Here it is on the screen. Don't misunderstand me. I value these God-given abilities. This is ends talking here. But it's like you're if God is the one who's given these abilities, it's almost like what they're saying. This is kind of what Kant ended up saying. Use your mind, the powers of your reason. God gave you that for everything else
Mm-hmm.
except Him.
Mm-hmm.
Use your mind. And granted, there are Christians who will say, no, we're supposed to use our minds. We're supposed to, da, da, da. But what ends is nudging people towards is if you use your mind, you're going to deconvert. You're going
Well,
to
no,
put
no.
two and two together. It's not going to add
Honestly,
up.
if
Right.
we're being fair to him, I would imagine he's saying, like, use your mind for everything and that way for everything else. But the way you're to use your mind best in this realm is to not expect of it. And I'd imagine, okay, I'm just imagining now.
Mm-hmm.
I'd imagine he would say that this has something to do with finitude coming into contact with infinitude.
Oh, yeah.
That
That's always
it
going to be the out.
necessarily
Yeah.
implies
Yeah.
this inexhaustibility.
Mm-hmm.
Or you might speak of
He might say it. Let me see if I have it in my notes. He might even say what you just said.
yeah.
I don't want to search for it, but I'm sure somewhere in here is the reason why you can't or shouldn't expect your mind to help
Is the
you.
limitations of your mind necessarily?
Were you talking this whole time?
Yeah, no. I just interjected. I said
Okay, yeah.
the
Yeah.
limitations of your mind or the inexhaustibility of his
Yeah.
is going to make it's going to necessarily cause you to not fully be able to grasp in a
Right.
rational way, because
Right.
what we're talking about is the meeting of transcendence with
And the Christian says amen to that. The Christian says, well, he's right then.
yeah.
He's right that at some point, and I guess if I were to give license to that, they would say at some point we do have to stop. At some point, knowledge is going to cease. Paul even says, all right, knowledge will cease. We see dimly. At some point, we're going to have to stop expecting to see because of how limited we are. Even if that were the case, I still would have to ask the question, okay, at what point is that? Because what ends is doing, this is the thing we talked about in one of our old episodes, is the things that have been revealed are supposed to be things that we can grasp and hold on to. It's the
Yeah.
things that have not been revealed that we're supposed to say, oh, that's God's territory. But what ends is going to do is say, well, all these things that have been revealed that don't add up, now put those in the incomprehensible category, put those in the category of things that that God might have said, but he didn't mean it, or he couldn't have meant. Oh, I'm sorry. There's one thing we have to read. We can close on this point. We have to read this. He says it. I was trying to say it for him, but he actually says it. We're going to end on this note right here. Let me find it real quick. Sorry for the pause, y'all. This is a great point to end on.
Yeah.
And hopefully, Jay, when you heard him make this point, it stood out to you. This whole chapter, what he basically does is he goes through 4 things that make Christians care about thinking rightly about the Bible, because before these 4 things, I guess maybe it didn't matter so much. But then he says this here.
Well, I mean, do you remember what it was about?
The quote I'm looking for?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Do you remember just like what he's referencing?
Just give me 1 second. I promise you it'll be worth it.
Just so we can introduce people to the thought of it.
It's nebulous right now. I got to get closer to it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Here it is, right here. All right. He says this. So he talks about a kind of certainty that you can bank on. He says, is the Bible's role really to give us certainty about what happened in the past? So I don't care whether you're talking about the resurrection, whether you're talking about the Exodus, whether you're talking about the Tower of Babel, anything. Is the Bible's role really to give us certainty about what happened in the past? Perhaps the endless back and forth debates were rooted. He's talking about the church, why the church can't ever agree on things. You got all these denominations that believe different things and all this, that, and the third. Why can't the church ever agree on anything? Why can't we ever know anything for certain? He says this. Here goes the quote, y'all. I believe that the Bible does not model a faith that depends on certainty for the simple fact that the Bible does not provide that kind of certainty. Think about that.
No, you got to finish that passage up. Rather, comma, what is he saying it does? Rather,
in all its messy diversity, the Bible models trust in God that does not rest on whether we are able to be clear and certain about what to believe.
Okay. And let's finish this off. In fact, the words belief and faith in the Bible are just different ways of saying trust. And trust works regardless of where our knowing happens to be.
That's the end of the chapter.
Yeah.
But think about that. He believes the Bible does not model a kind of faith that depends on certainty. Why? Because it doesn't provide any certainty. Like, how circular is that? Because the book doesn't give me anything to be certain about, I don't think it supports a faith that depends on certainty. Like, all you're basically doing is saying, because it's unreliable, it must have never meant to be.
You just think about Job's words. I know that my Redeemer lives. In the end, he will stand on the earth. He says, I know that's going to happen. You know, that's committed to us. Trying to think of, look, like I said, Paul's prayer, that they would be filled with the spirit of wisdom and revelation and the knowledge of him that is in Christ, of Christ. All right, what does that mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I write these things to you that you might know the certainty of the things you believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. He says, and it even speaks of people who have shipwrecked their faith and gone the way of Hymenaeus. What does that even mean? What is it?
Right.
Like, how can you shipwreck a faith that you can't define?
Exactly. What is the content of this faith that doesn't depend on you being able to know anything? He says the Bible, in all its messy diversity, it models a trust in God that does not.
Now we can agree with that. We can agree with the messy diversity because we think it's multivocal, right? Or yeah.
But it does not. It models the kind of faith that does not rest on whether we are able to. That's
where we get into a problem, because
certain.
He goes from this multivocal and within the same sentence, this messy diversity, which is due to the fact that you have all these different voices. And he says, but rather it. Now he's speaking of it univocally.
Right, exactly.
Like as if it's also in the same sentence, he's claiming one thing and denying it simultaneously. In logic, that's called a contradiction.
Right.
You can't have both. You can't have both a multivocal or text and a univocal text. You can't have both of those things simultaneously.
What he
Either it's going to be.
Yeah, well,
Go
we've
ahead.
said this before. Like it's talking out both sides of your mouth. It's
Yeah.
it's two things that can't be true at once. But this is what he says in this sentence here.
What's that character on Batman where he has the two faces?
Two-Face, yeah, Two-Face.
That's what we got here, right?
Yeah. What he basically is saying here is, whatever the book does, I'm going to accept.
Yeah.
It must not present a faith that depends on certainty. Why? Because it doesn't give me anything to be certain about. So that must not be what it was meant to do. Except for all the times it tells me that it was meant to do that. Now I have to find myself disregarding that.
Yeah. Well, you have to disregard it because you know that that's an impossibility.
Right. To save the book, I have to disregard the book.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's to preserve a thing. This reminds me. I got another analogy. It reminds me of a person where the sacredness of their marriage vows have been, the person's cheated or whatever, and you're like, okay, or I have to let go of the idea that this marriage was a sacred thing in order to save it. So I have to turn it into something else. It may be an open marriage or something else. But if I can turn it into this other thing, I can maintain the union of the marriage. But I can't maintain the union of it, thinking of it as this other thing that I thought of it previously.
Well, what I have to do is I have to burn the wedding video. I have to, pretend that we never made vows in public. I have to do something with what we said it was going to be.
Yeah, yeah. And for him, it's like, well, in some sense, now this would go along with your take. It would be to pretend that you never even initially meant those things initially, right? Yeah. Like it would be to say, I never even really, I said the words, sickness and health, whatever, but I didn't. Let's be for real. It was like an emotional thing that was going on. It had nothing to do with those things ultimately, right?
Exactly.
And if you can convince yourself, so this is almost an exercise in self-deception or gaslighting oneself. Now, is it possible to gaslight oneself?
I think people do it all the time. It's denial. That's what denial is.
Well, it ain't just the river in Egypt, right?
Hey, it's been 2 hours, man. We had a lot. I think this was a great episode. There's a lot there. Hopefully you guys in the chat, we're getting it in and we're kind to anybody who was there. What's up, Oz? I see you. Let me see if I missed any super chats. This is the second week in a row that we didn't take any calls. So maybe next week we'll try to get in and out sooner to try to get a call.
Yeah,
anybody was here waiting to call. But hey, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe. If you get a chance, maybe come back through and leave a comment, because once the live closes, all these comments won't be readily available. So come back through, leave a comment. We definitely appreciate you guys. We will be on Sunday.
Do you have my sound turned on?
I don't. Sorry. Let me go and turn you on so you can get us out of here. Sunday, we will be here live at 11 a.m. Eastern for our second Nurch service. That will be me, Jay Witt, and Albert Kim. And we are we're dancing in the aisles. We're dancing in the aisles on our way out of here. And yeah, much love, guys. We'll catch you back here next week.
Yes, sir. Yes.